Less than 2 weeks from the Alabama game. Where is Florida State's culture? How's the depth chart developing? Let's talk Noles.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Happy to be back with you. We are one day closer, as they say, to the college football season. We got Farmageddon this weekend, Iowa State versus Kansas State. I believe they're playing in Ireland, but it is, quote unquote, the official start to college football. And to that, we'll talk a little broad picture later on in the podcast. But I just have like 6 points / questions and one main theme to talk about on the show tonight. And that is culture for Florida State. Where is it now? Where does it need to get to help the Noles long-term make it back and be a prominent program and get it into the playoff and do something once they're there? So I'm going to make a few general statements. I want everybody that comes in to make their own comments. Please join the chat. Have a comment for me. Have a question, something you want to bring up. It's not even related to tonight's topic, by all means. Again, if you're just joining, go ahead, comment, make a question for something for me on the team, depth chart, whatever. I'm happy to get into that too. We'll make this a mailbag kind of episode. But most importantly, what do you think of Florida State's culture now? And where do you think it needs to get to? I want to give my direct take on that over and over again throughout this pod. And we're going to discuss whether or not Florida State is closer than you originally thought they'd be at this point, say, compared to spring or not. Kind of like we need to gauge this in sections. Like you got the spring period, you got summer with all the workouts and mostly with the training staff and that strength staff. And then you get into fall camp and you're with the coaches again. Like where is Florida State with all the things that we've heard? So first off, it is no secret that Conrad Hussey, if you've watched any of the videos around the internet, War Chant or anybody else, it was probably time for him to go from all the little bits and pieces. When I knew him, when he was in high school, I had no problems with him, good kid and all that. But for whatever reason, I heard there was a little too much me. That is at least the overall sentiment. Again, I don't know. I haven't spoken to Conrad Hussey in a long time, but that's part of the permeating problem that existed from last year's team. That is the theme. That is the concern. Florida State had a lot of players last year that looked at it from what's my NIL going to be, or at least they had somebody in their camp that was bugging somebody in Florida State's football office. That I know. And I also know that Florida State had too many players that just weren't good enough. Like they misguided themselves on some portal additions, etc. And when you put all of that into one elixir, sometimes it's going to come out pretty sour. And that's what you get with the season they had. So how do you rebound from that? That's the culture part. They needed to go to the portal. They grabbed, I believe it's 23 players from the transfer portal, which is way too high, but they were kind of forced because they failed with high school recruiting. It's like one thing begets the other, catch 22. And Florida State was in a bad spot. So they had to do that. But they also finally, by the way, even at the end of a terrible season with all the changes coming, they finished the recruiting class pretty strong. And that was the culmination of, like, I'm sure the administration say, hey, you need to fix this or y'all are gone. They did clean house to a certain degree, coordinators and all that. But that was the beginning of the culture. Some guys were told, yeah, go ahead. If you want this NIL or you're re-asking and after the season you said, you can hit the road. That was the next part. And then finally, they brought in some guys that were better fits for Florida State University for this season. Still got to perform, but I haven't heard, maybe I'm just not informed enough, but I haven't heard a single player they brought in for the portal like is a definitive problem. Again, I don't know for sure, but that's a great starting point. So before I jump into the chat, and I see there's a couple of questions, but I'll get in there in the next 5-10 minutes. I want to go over a couple of points. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball because most people want to see Florida State, myself included, do better on offense anyway. As we break this down, do they have the right guy in Tommy Castellanos to make it happen? Now, I know Tommy from the high school time and from his time at UCF. I didn't talk to him while he was at BC. I haven't spoken to him since he's been at Florida State. That being the case, you can tell by his press conferences and just the way he carries himself, all the videos. He's a pretty confident young man, and he's one that's matured in a lot of ways. He's brash. He opens his mouth a lot, obviously, with the comments about Bama. I get it, but this is a pretty mature guy. I don't think he's going to have a hard time being the leader at Florida State. Just my opinion. And I also know he's intelligent. He's going to be able to pick up the offense and do the things needed, blah, blah, blah. So he could lead by example, but he's a boisterous guy. And when he was at Ware County High School, a lot of people looked up to him just in the community, even before he was even old enough to vote. So I think he'll handle that pretty well. I'm hoping that the younger quarterbacks, Kevin Sperry, just as an example, will be able to take that on. And a Chroma, a Boggs, Elijah Moore, all the different guys, Jalen Lucas, anybody that is an underclassman in any way, shape, or form, or just getting started at Florida State, whether they're a transfer, they can learn from that and they can galvanize, because when your quarterback is a leader, whether by example, by his voice, or preferably both, you usually do better when the chips are down. And Florida State's schedule is I would say it's probably a little bit above average in terms of big game difficulty, because they've got major teams on their schedule every year in Florida, in Miami in terms of talent, but they also have NC State on the road. They got Virginia on the road on a Friday night. They got some quiet games that can cause you problems. That Virginia Tech game comes to mind. And of course, you got Bama at the beginning of the season. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong in any one of those games, but you still got to be able to rebound, even when it looks terrible. If your quarterback's the right guy, it can start that process. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form Tommy's the guy to lead him to a national title this year. I don't believe that at all. But this is a much better situation than when Florida State was in last year. That is massive. Absolutely massive for Florida State. You got to fix quarterback so people believe and then work for what they need to be doing as a team. Nobody wants to work hard and go 2-10. Like after last year, they needed something. They went out and got a quarterback. Good for Florida State. Secondarily, he's a guy, again, that's pretty good dude. I highly doubt he's going to have a hard time making friends on the team. Makes it a little bit easier, again, to galvanize good times and bad and anywhere in between. NFL, it's different. A lot of guys don't necessarily like each other, but they're being paid a ton of money, and they're truly professionals. They're a little more experienced, a little wiser, and they've got more battles that they've been through. They learn to deal with it better, or they get cut. So college is harder, but having Tommy, I think, is a big part of it. Number two, with the trust in him in general, I think that just gives you some purpose as a coordinator. Gus, do I think they trust in Gus? He brought in Tommy, so he's going to get a little bit of credit for that if I'm right about Tommy. And additionally, he's coached Cam Newton. He's coached a lot of guys like Bo Nix, et cetera, that have went on to play major college football, be successful. College football turns into the NFL draft, et cetera, et cetera. He's had a lot of guys, running backs, linemen, receivers, get drafted, be successful. I think that helps too, because Norvell giving up the play calls, giving it to Gus, letting him be a CEO was probably really good for the program. Really good for the program. I think that's going to be a major part of what we need to see. And hopefully, I could be wrong on this, but hopefully Florida State is able to use that this year and they can gain even more steam in the offseason because they win a few big games and they show consistency. They don't get beat up in any game. They don't lose anything like 41-14 or anything. If they have the culture, I think they're starting to build, and it's still a long way to go. Don't get it twisted. If I'm right about it, especially on offense, I'll get to defense here in about 10 minutes. I think that will help a lot in closer games against Miami, against Florida, against Bama, against NC State. Any moment where you just struggle, if you believe in the guy calling plays and you believe in the guy behind center, those are really big starting points. And then I'm not going to expand on this, but think about the offensive line. They're going to be all senior, fifth-year senior kind of guys. Probably going to have a little more belief there. And on top of it, you got Rodell, you got Deuce Robinson. That's a guy, like receivers aren't usually leaders. I can just tell you from being around Deuce, that's the kind of guy you want to be around. I don't know Squirrel. Boggs is a guy that easily can adapt. And even though he's a freshman, I think people will respect him. This is a good start for Florida State building their culture. They got the right guys on offense from what I know. There could be a bad apple somewhere. I don't know about that. I have not heard that one iota. But right now, I'm pretty happy, to be honest, where Florida State's offense is in the slow build, because it's like government. It moves at a snail's pace. But long term, this is the path you want to be on, especially with them having to use the portal as much as they did, and that'll get mitigated. They should be on the right path, and by 2027, this should be an offense that every team in college football respects and fears because of the talent and the people they have running it all in conjunction. When we come back, we're going to shift over a little bit to the defense, talk a little bit about recruiting in the portal. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. If you're trying to figure out who it's going to be for the NFL this year, I said this a few times before, talking to some other people in different podcasts, but I think Joe Burrow is going to give Patrick Mahomes a run for his money. Josh Allen too. I think it could be one of those three for NFL MVP. There's a lot of different possibilities. Maybe you want to do an over-under with Aaron Rodgers if you want to talk about what his numbers are going to be. Maybe it's something else. Prize Picks has you covered. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 on lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. And this show is also brought to you by Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. When I'm on top of my hydration, I feel better, I stretch better, I move better, I think better. Drip Drop is a way to stay on top of your hydration as well. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. So if you're working out, if you're out in the heat, it is August. It's hot, especially if you're in the Tallahassee area. Get ready to go to the Florida State game against Bama. You definitely need some hydration. Whatever it is you're doing, use Drip Drop as an option to keep yourself hydrated. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Truly appreciate you stopping in to get all your Noles information, injuries, depth charts, insights, perspectives, and a whole lot of recruiting and transfer portal, because that is my bag right here on Locked On Seminoles. Lock in by subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Comment, share this podcast with anybody you can, and make sure if you're on Apple or one of the apps that you're carrying around, you're going to the grocery store or whatever, listen to this, download that, and use the automatic downloads anytime a new show comes up. Let's talk a little bit about the portal and recruiting in general here. I mentioned in the last segment, Florida State's doing a good job. Keyword, doing a good job. They're not excellent yet. They've improved their talent, but they bring in guys like Kevin Wynn, Javen Boggs, guys they're not only willing to play early, that's obvious, but they're also bringing them to the podium. Are you going to put freshmen up there, no matter how good they are, unless you really trust in them to represent your brand? No, not a chance. Kevin Wynn's a dude. Boggs is a dude. Chroma, another guy, he's a dude. They could all end up playing major roles or possibly starting this year. That's hard to do at Florida State. And I know they're coming off a bad season. There's still a lot of talent in Tallahassee. Florida State is making the right decisions there. I already talked about Tommy from the portal. Williams, talk about him like that's a guy, bring him in from Nebraska. He's an all shucks, easygoing guy. He's going to fit in well in the culture of North Florida, South Georgia. Not a problem. He's just, like he said when he first got here in the spring, hey, I just needed to adjust to the weather, which I get that. Nebraska to Northern Florida is a big change, but they're bringing in better guys from the portal too. Like not just talent, but people that will fit inside the locker room, inside the culture of the institution itself, and the coaches can handle. To use the old axiom that I've probably said on this show more times than I can count, and several other podcasts as well that I visit. There's a book called Good to Great. It's about business success. Get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, and get the right people in the right seats. Once you get them to campus, you got to find the best niche for them. And they had to get rid of some people. They've done that and done it a lot better. I don't know what happened when they changed that, but it really, really improved. I'll get into the defense here in just a second, but I want to look at the comments and see what we got going on tonight. And thank you for everybody that is commenting here on this live edition of Locked On Seminoles. It's always a lot of fun to do this. All right, Billy, let's see. I'm so hopeful we don't, the bet again this year. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's why I'm talking about this culture. The culture was bad. So when things went iffy last year, I knew. I called it after game 2. I said, this team's going to win 2 or 3 games, and that's it. They won 2. All right, James Voss. Mike cannot develop players, and you know that. 6-6 Mike is out. Seeing interview today, and Coach O ready to come back. I don't think he's getting fired after this year. Too big, no doubt about it. Too big a contract. Manu Braxton, I think we've got to be surprisingly good team this year. Go Noles. I think Florida State's going to be better than a lot of people think. I just don't know how much that's going to reflect in the record because of what I talked about earlier. That's what the schedule. B. Reader, Mike Norvell, 6-year Florida State portal success, 10-2 and 22, 13-1 and 23, a nation's longest win streak, 19 games, 5 first-rounders, 26 NFL draftees. Those are impressive numbers. But it just shows you how difficult it is from year to year to use the portal. And I think part of it, and you bring up a good point here, when kids are recruited out of high school, eventually they get tired of being jumped over by portal guys. They don't want to hear it. I think that's part of the culture problem. And it's not just the Florida State, that's anywhere. Let's see here. HK Morrow LS1. All Gus do is beat Bama. Gus beat Alabama 3 times during his tenure at Auburn. Luke, do you think Tommy goes over or under 7 interceptions this season? Over. I would go over. He's going to take some chances down the field. And part of that's Gus's offense. It's hard to explain to you how much Gus really likes to throw deep, but everything he does, and he talked about this in his opening press conference way back when, 6 months ago or whatever. It's hard to explain to you just how much he uses the inside game to try to draw safeties up. It's just straightforward. There's no hindrance on what he's trying to do here. If you don't respect their run game, they'll beat you to death for 4-yard runs all the way down the field. But if you come up, Gus is happy to throw it over your head. That's part of it. It's RPO. Part of it's just, hey, they're up. Check. Let's go deep. Surfer RC. Mike developed a lot of draft picks, so can he keep it up? Like, yes and no. Developed is a touchy word because not many of those kids were high school guys. That's true too. So how do you count that? Like, I don't know how much credit he gets. He has to get some of it, but how do you do that in totality? I'm not sure the answer to that part of it. Surfer, how long will it take the O-line to gel? That is the $1 million question, brother. Not a clue. I'm concerned. I've heard iffy things, and I'll talk about it in a little bit on the backside of this after I talk about the defense, but I've heard some iffy things about the left tackle spot, so that's something we'll get to in a minute. Luke, do you think Deuce will be even better for Florida State this season than Keon was in 23? No. Keon was unbelievably clutch. I'm not putting that on Deuce. What'd Keon have, like 11 or 12 big catches, like in just the most critical moments, handful of other touchdowns, good blocker. Like he did all the little things too. Like he didn't even get credit for it. He was as clutch a receiver as there was that season. I don't know if Deuce can go that far. We'll see. It'd be great, but I doubt that. Surfer, Deuce is similar to Keon, but the game plan will throw the ball less, so don't expect better stats than Keon on 23. That's another good way to look at it. Gus is going to run 60-40. Run to pass, 60-40. That's kind of the way it goes. Let's see here. Brian Sullivan. It has rained in Tallahassee for the 7 to 8 days. It's going to be so humid for the game. Oof. Yeah, you're probably right. Samuel Gibson. What's going on, buddy? I just now been able to get on. I had work late. Glad you're in, bro. Hope you're having fun. Ray Dripper. yeah, Mike put Florida State in a horrible position. There's not much doubt about that. Whatever happens to this Florida State-Bama game, we're going to know what the culture is, win or lose. There's some truth in that, and I want to come back to that. I got to take another break here real quick. But when we come back, I'm going to break down my concerns. Got a little O-line concern. I want to talk about injury thing or whatever. And then we're going to get into defense. Then I'll get back into the chat. But Florida State football is trending the right way, but how fast? I want you all to think about that. And we come back here on Locked On Seminoles. All right, this episode is also brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designated to streamline and scale your customer communications. For one, you can have everybody use the same number that's added to their phone. That way the inbox is being handled by everybody, not just one person. And if they're not available, you miss a call. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off their first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. That's openphone.com/LockedOnCollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. All right, let's jump back into the chat here and get back into that. Let's see here. Mr. Voss, if he wins 5 games only, does Florida State keep Mike? I think they would keep him at 4. And here's why. His contract is massive. I don't agree with it, but it is massive. It's just terrible timing. This is nobody's fault, but when coaches go 13-0 to start a season, they generally get contract extensions. Then he just bombed. So it's just awkward. Default name. Who is taking the plus 13.5? Great question. If you're taking the 13.5, let's hear why. If you're not, let's also hear why. That is the point spread at last I saw on FanDuel. Good question. Samuel Gibson, as bad as I hate to say it, Dabo Swinney has got it kind of figured out. He takes fewer guys than anybody in the portal. They took 4 this year, I believe, but they're winning. Mr. Reader, Florida State's added portal production in 25, over 3,200 yards and 26 touchdowns, Squirrel, Deuce, Sawchuck, and Pittman. That's a lot of talent. That's not in debate. But I'm going to use that point. I'm going to lead this up as I transition to this following point. Florida State, like anybody else, has players that come into the program that were recruited, offered by Miami and Georgia Tech and Clemson and LSU and Ole Miss, all these different schools. By the end of their sophomore year, they expect to play a lot. They don't want to hear, no matter how good they are, even if they're better than them, they're going to their junior year, they're taking a portal guy over them. Just the way it works. Now, the people here that are not watching, they're listening to this podcast. Reader just said the following, and I'm using this as the barometer. Florida State added portal production in 25, 3,200 yards, 26 TDs, Squirrel, Deuce, Sawchuck, and Pittman. He's right. That's a tremendous amount of talent. You're still probably going to tick a lot of guys off when you do this stuff. At some point, and this is the ouchie here, this is the awkward moment. Every program that's been heavy in the portal is going to have to do this at some point. You're going to have to take a year. It could be, I think it should be after this season for Florida State. Just hear me out, where you take fewer transfer portal players by a ton. They took 23, I believe, for 25. And you got to eat it next year. Probably won't be as good as you could have been for 1 year, but a bunch of younger guys are forced to play, gain valuable experience, and you add to your culture. That's what Florida did last year and this year. The Gators took, I think it's 6 guys that took in the portal this offseason. They needed more. They did. They needed more. But they just went high school. They're going to play a lot of younger guys as backups, key backups. Next year, they're going to lose some key seniors like Jake Slaughter, et cetera, at center. He's an All-American candidate. But they'll have more guys that are happy because they at least played. That's a culture builder. I don't think Napier's a great coach by any stretch. He's not. But I think long-term, that's smart. Florida State's got to do that at some point. So does Ole Miss. So does Texas Tech. Now, I don't know if Texas Tech can get enough high school players to do that, but you get my point. Teams that are 20, 30 deep in the portal every year. Florida State's usually in that barometer. They're going to struggle with culture far more often than Ohio State, than Notre Dame, than Penn State, than Texas, than Bama, than Georgia. They take fewer portal players. They're high school kids. If they're getting beat out, they're getting beat out probably by somebody younger than them. Then it's on them. When you get somebody that's a sophomore going to go junior year, and you go get a fifth-year senior, they're not real happy about it, and that's why you lose players. So something to think about. Jay Craig, could Tommy Castellanos apply for next year with the new bowl redshirt rules? Would be huge for another season with an experienced quarterback. I'd have to look at it, but I thought he played 5 games and it wasn't a bowl. If it is, that's possible, and I would think they would give him that chance. And I think Florida State should take a transfer quarterback, barring something unforeseen this year. I was thinking about this actually earlier today. When you kind of look at it from a broad perspective, except for Tommy, Florida State, like most teams, doesn't really have more than one guy on their roster at quarterback that's played. Brock Glenn's played a little bit. Kevin Sperry hasn't played at all, etc. They don't have P4 experience. If they don't have like 6-7 games where they were good, not just played at the P4 level as quarterbacks, it's not much experience. They got their head beat in. And Brock didn't have a chance last year with that offensive line. So regardless of how he played, he didn't have a chance. They probably have to go get one. So if they got Tommy coming back, you not only have a veteran quarterback, somebody knew the system. That would be awesome for Florida State. But 2 things. Number 1, do I ever trust the NCAA? No. And number 2, I don't know what Tommy's destination is after this year because we don't know how he's going to play. I don't know if he'd want to come back. I don't think he's an NFL quarterback. But at the same time, if he balls out, maybe he gets a chance or maybe he goes. That's something we'll have to figure out after this season. Christopher Kirby, flip targets for Florida State if things are going well. Pretty much anybody in the state of Florida, first off. It's just their base, really. State of Florida kids, South Georgia kids, Atlanta kids, maybe a few kids in the state of Alabama, especially if Auburn falls off. Those are possibilities. After that, I don't know. If you want to get specific about it, I would, for one, it should be anything on the I-10 corridor. They have bombed on the I-10 corridor, which is very disappointing. From Jacksonville to Mobile, that's got to be your base every year, and they've really failed. It's ironic because they've got a much better class than normal. It's been weird, but whatever. They need to hit there. I forget the kid's name, but the defensive end committed to LSU. Maybe they don't think he's worth the money. I heard LSU really ponied up for him. He's big-time talent. Right now, his name's escaping me. He'd be one. After that, I don't know. They got Jacoby Green, a kid that's pretty local. But by and large, they didn't hit enough local for me. So that would be a possibility. And really, in a lot of ways, the South Georgia kids fit FSU as much, if not more, than a lot of the kids from like north of Tampa do. Those kids are really blue collar. I think they fit Florida State. So any of those kids that are late bloomers, not just flips, but somebody that has some offers but wants a bigger offer, Florida State, under Bowden especially, really found a lot of those guys. Why not again this year? There's certainly a possibility. Chris Russell. I'm not sure who you mean. Oh, if he's talking about Calvin Russell, that's possible. The big thing, from what I understand with Calvin Russell, and he's the wide receiver, freaky kid at Miami Northwestern, is basketball. Syracuse really sold him on being able to play both, like legitimately. I know Mario at Miami doesn't want him to do it. Like, he kind of let him, but he really doesn't want him to. That's why Miami's not going to get it. How much does Florida State buy into that? Because you're going to lose a lot of reps in football in terms of how you train, how you gain weight, and that kid needs to gain weight. It'd be hard for him to play both. So we'll see. Luke, Trent Henderson, there you go. Johnny Jones would be the biggest flips in my opinion. I am not near as high on Johnny Jones as a lot of other people. I don't think he's that great. I think he's too raw. I don't like the way he moves, but other people are in, choose your own path. Florida State does need another tackle in this class. Trent Henderson's the kid from Pensacola Catholic I was talking about a minute ago. 6'4", 225, pure pass rusher. B. Reader, Bama's game 1 returning production. Quarterbacks and running backs is very little. 72 sacks the past 2 seasons overall. Only 10 touchdowns returning. Ryan Williams, 6. Jeremy Bernard, 4. Indoke. Look, I'm going to be real blunt here. Alabama's offensive line's got an All-American at center and left tackle. Those 2 guys are dudes. If Florida State's going to make hay, it's the right tackle, most likely. One of their guards, I don't know if it's right or left side, has been banged up, but they got another guy that's pretty talented. Do not sleep on their O-line. Really, really talented. Their running back room is a bunch of 4 and 5 stars. I'm not concerned if, I know, get the kid's name, but the main guy got hurt. They're loaded. They're loaded at running back. And Ryan Williams is a 3-and-out top 10 pick. Bernard's a consistent player, and they got Isaiah Horton at the other spot. Their offense is loaded. Florida State makes a mistake. It's a touchdown. You can look at the stats all you want. I've been around a lot of those kids. I have seen them play through high school. A lot of them are Florida kids, South Alabama kids. I know them. They're going to be just fine on offense. Do not discount Alabama's offense. Christopher Kirby. How long can we expect to hold on to Tony? Dude is going to be a head coach soon. I 100% agree. 2 years tops would be my guess. Here's the question, and I could use this for a lot of guys. Think about it with Bowden's staff, or any of you want to research it. He had a lot of guys that could have taken jobs that stayed because they liked being with Bobby, and they didn't just want a job. They wanted an elite job. Mark Richt waited for the Georgia job. That's obviously an elite job. Most of his guys didn't want to leave unless they got dug in. Mike Mickens at Notre Dame, assistant head coach, DB guy. He's probably the best overall DB coach, evaluator, recruiter in the country. He doesn't want like a MAC job or some. He wants an elite job, but he doesn't have any coordinator experience. Notre Dame might get lucky and keep him for a while. Kind of like keeping Rick at Florida State for a long, long time. Those things happen. But Tony's now been the main guy at like 3 schools. He speaks well. He's respected by the media. Unless he just is just hell-bent on like, UF, Florida State, LSU kind of level, 2 more years tops is what I say. That's my guess. FSU wins 4 games max. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Okay, I don't know who this guy is. I'll bet my life savings Mike doesn't win 7 games. He's fired to start next season. They can't afford it at all this season, no matter how bad he is. Okay, well, we'll see what happens with that. Samuel Gibson. That would be Miller. I'm not sure what you're referencing, but I'm going to go on to the defense anyway right now to kind of wrap up the show. Here's my concern. I've heard, well, by the way, there's some injury. The Hansen kid, there's rumors he's been banged up, and Jacob Rizzi's been playing there. Just going to make this straightforward and simple. I have no way to verify or not. If Florida State is having problems for under any guys at left tackle, it will be a massive problem against Alabama. Not a big one, massive. You cannot be weak on the edges at offensive tackle against Bama. They got more pass rushers you can shake a stick at, and they got a lot of size anyway. You can't be leading your tight end or whatever to help all the time, at least some of it. I get it. But if that is a problem, if that rumor is true, Florida State is in trouble against Bama. That is my biggest problem with this game going in now, and it's just part of the luck. If somebody's banged up or just playing bad or both, Florida State's not ready at offensive tackle. All the different reports out of all the different networks, Florida State's depth on the O-line is not ready, which we kind of expected. That cannot happen against Alabama. It is a problem, not only potentially lose the game, but it is also a possible problem to see a bunch of guys lose confidence because you get stomped. Like you can have Tommy get hit early, fumble, scoop, and score. Those kind of plays can catapult a team really quick and take the crowd out at Doak, which I expect to be electric in Doak Campbell Stadium with all the new, like they did. If you haven't looked at it, the renderings on the inside of the stadium, they're putting in new grass, by the way, and all the different stuff. They've done a marvelous job. I'm really impressed. And I don't know which, if I knew the name of the company or companies, I'd shout out, but I honestly don't know who it is. Congrats to all of them that have done up Doak Campbell. It looks fantastic. Go look at it on social media, type in new Doak Campbell Stadium renovations, whatever you want to do. It'll pop up really, really good. But on to the defense. I said I'd get to this. I've waited too long as it is. The defense is more concerning with the culture. Tony White has done a great job of putting in the system. We haven't heard a whole bunch about guys not knowing what they're doing. And we've heard about competition across the board, especially at linebacker. And that's good because that's really hard to learn when you go from a 4-3 to a 3-4 or a hybrid. they've done a good job by all accounts. JP talked about it at a press conference today. He was very happy. Says they're 60. That's great. But you get rid of Hussey. He needed to go. And Tony was mad at that press. I think it was last week. There's obviously some still issues in that locker room in some capacity. He didn't call guys out directly, but indirectly by not naming certain people, but not giving enough praise. And you could tell like steam was coming off his bald head. I'm concerned about that in a much different way than I am about the offense. Like I think there's enough leadership, the right people, that they'll be okay if things go wrong. They'll be able to right the ship in the game. I'm not as sure about defense. I don't know who the leaders are besides Darrell. It sounds like Darrell took some ownership, and that's good. But I'm not sure they're where they need to be. And having your 335-pound nose guard that's a future NFL first or second round pick be that guy, that's good. But the linebackers are 2 transfers probably, or at least one of them is going to be that starts, probably Herring. In the secondary, Shaheem Brown hasn't been talked about near as much. Who's that guy going to be? A bunch of newness. I need to see something go wrong, especially on the back end, for me to feel good about Florida State against Bama. And then for the rest of the season. To that point, this is why I've said a few times, and I want to dig into this just for a second to kind of close up the show before I do. I'll read the last few comments too. Florida State is not a year out from being really good. They're at least 2. And I said at least because they've got to recruit high school at a much higher clip in terms of the elite talent and volume. It's not one or the other. It's both. You're going to wash out some of the problems, fix some of the culture, but you got to take far, far, far fewer players from the portal. Even if that means eating it next year and going 6-6, you got to play the high school kids. This is the new wave. If you look at the teams that made the Final Four last year, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, combined, they took 35 transfer portal players last season. Florida State going into this year took 23 in 1 year by themselves. It's too much. There's too many chances for problems. And I think part of that, they missed on high school recruiting. I get why they did it, but it is what it is. Florida State needs to find a way to galvanize the best they can this year, but I'm not as hopeful on defense. We'll see. And I could be wrong. And if they come out and play really well against Bama, that could be the first stepping stone to being a galvanized team. Hard to say, but Florida State is not there yet. So which player or players, preferably, will it be? Is it Earl or is it Jerry? Like having him come in the portal was a blessing. He's a little different guy. I'll take all the Jerry's, portal or not, I can get. Jeremiah Wilson is a dude, and he loves it at Florida State. He was a fan. Like, that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be at Florida State, right? I mean, he respects the spear. And you should always respect the spear. To that point, how many more guys can they get like that from this freshman class to step up between this next offseason in spring ball and then spring ball through summer and at this exact same time in 2026? That's the question. Because they got a chance to be better than I think if a few of those younger guys that are currently freshmen or sophomores take not steps forward, but major steps forward, not just physically, not just playbook, but in leadership and accountability for other people too. That's where Florida State used to be awesome at it. The Bowden's teams were famous with that. Are they now? We don't know. We got to go through it. They just changed a bunch of coaches, changed schemes, a bunch of new players. They're starting over, but they needed to. So we'll see how that goes. Let me get back into the chat here. Let's see. Hattie May. Enjoyed the Locked On crossover with Bama. Bama fan, watched that and was extremely impressed with your analysis on the Tide, realistic and just. Absolutely. I think Alabama is a really good football team. They could win it this year. It's possible. Like a lot of teams this year, is the quarterback going to be ready? There's really no way to know. Let's see here. My best friend in college was a Florida State fan. We cheered when Florida State beat Auburn for the national title. Jam Miller, collarbone strain or something of that nature. Oh, he's talking about the running back. Yeah, the starting running back for Bama is out. Thank you for reminding me. Jam's a pretty good player. Kid, I believe he's out of Texas. Unfortunate. He's going to miss the opening game, a chance to play at Doak, but they are deep at running back. B-Reader, instant turnaround. Tony White dropped 100 sports in every defensive, 100 spots in every defensive stat his year at Syracuse and the first year at Nebraska. Like, it's unbelievable what Tony White did his last 2 stops. We'll see what he can do this year at Florida State. Had a UGA game as timetable at this point, I imagine. Okay. Going to be a great game. It's a beautiful campus. Florida State does have a nice campus. Luke, we need to only take Deuce Robinson, Jeremiah Wilson types from now on. That would be great. Here's the one problem with that, Luke. In general, I agree. This is the one caveat. When you miss so badly at the high school ranks, you don't have any other options. And that's what Florida State did, especially O-line and quarterback. What were the 2 spots they sucked at the most last year? Yeah. They missed those. You go back and look at those 2021 and 22 classes. 21, like, there was no excuse. Like, they should have been rolling. 22, maybe even more. They missed pretty much on everybody, O-line, quarterback. Here are a few exceptions, but very few. And they just got behind the 8 ball. And it killed them. So, with that, it is what it is. I appreciate everybody for stopping in. Please hit that like, hit that subscribe. This has been Locked On Seminoles with another live edition. I'm going to put this show up for the Tuesday morning crowd that likes to listen in the morning. We'll have more stuff each and every day as we get closer to Alabama coming to Doak Campbell Stadium. So again, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit automatic download if you're taking your podcast to go on Podbean or Apple, Spotify, whatever it is. We will see you again soon on Locked On Seminoles.